Hello everyone, Leaf Reed here, and today we have Macbeth by Shakespeare. I mean, of all of Shakespeare's plays, I haven't seen all of them, obviously, but Macbeth is definitely my favorite. It's a very simple revenge gone wrong story. Even the lines in the chapters, I read this back in high school, but still today, it's a book I still connect with, or I feel a lot of energy from. It's a great story, and in fact I think there was a movie done recently in 2016 or 18 with Michael Fassbender. I think I've seen parts of it. My brother was watching it and I was like, oh, okay, I recognize that. But of all Shakespeare's plays, this is probably my favorite. It's a very I don't want to say straightforward, but it's very typical or archetypical story, rather, in the sense that you have this Duke, Macbeth, and his best friend Banquo, and they come upon these witches, and they give him a prophecy that he will be the king over Scotland. He will rule the whole country, basically. And it's this vision, this lust for power that warps him, and it's almost like in the way power corrupts people, but in that same essence, he doesn't actually have the power yet, but they plant the idea of him already owning that power, and it corrupts him. It turns him, sadly, to assassinate the king. It turns him against his certain subjects, and it turns him against Macbeth, obviously, and most tragically, I feel, it turns him against his best friend Banquo, who he sends his guys after to murder because he's a witness, and essentially he's haunted by Banquo's ghost, and this feeling of betrayal that he's done something awful, and it haunts him in the halls of his castle, even after he has his whole castle to himself. And since I'm just covering all of this, it doesn't really matter, because when you see it in context or read it in context, it's so much more lively and vibrant. But the way it ends is that he ends up killing Macduff's family. Basically, Macduff swears revenge on Macbeth, and there's some prophecy that he will only die. The witches say he will only die if the forest moves against him. He can only be killed by a man not born of woman naturally. These three things kind of culminate where Macbeth has slain the king and he's consolidated his power. Macduff comes against him, and the way they sneak or do a surprise attack is they all take the branches of the leaves of the trees or something, and they'll camouflage themselves as the trees, so it looks like the forest is moving, so they don't realize there's actually an army approaching. And then Lady Macbeth throws herself from the balcony, and then there's Macduff's big reveal is that he is not born naturally from a woman, because he was untimely ripped from her womb, essentially meaning that they did a C-section, which is unnatural, I guess, in this case. And so that is like, oh no, the prophecy has come true, and Macduff decapitates Macbeth, and it's kind of like, all these characters have died and they come together, and it's kind of like reconciling how they can't start over, but you still feel the loss and the grief and the death. And that's the whole book in a nutshell. And you see it's very small. However, like anything Shakespeare writes, it is difficult to read because it's so... Read this. I'd speak mine own detraction, here abjure, the taints and blames I laid upon myself. For strangers to my nature, I am yet unknown to women, never was forsworn, scarcely have coveted what was mine own. At no time broke mine faith, would not betray the devil to his fellow, and delight no less in truth than life. My first false speaking was this upon myself: what I am truly is thine and my poor country's to command, whither indeed before thy here approach, old seaward, with 10,000 warlike men already at a point was setting forth. Now we're together, and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Why art thou silent, Macduff? Such welcome and unwelcoming things at once. Anyway, and the whole thing is written as a play, obviously. And if you're not familiar with that, it's everything is usually divided into 3 acts, or actually, how many acts is this? Yeah, it's always going to be Act 1, Scene 1, and they're going to say, enter this person as that person. They'll have these things called asides, which are interesting, again, if you're not familiar. An aside is when the main character will just monologue, as if no one else is around him, even though they're obviously there in earshot. I would say this is actually easier to read than normal literature, depending, on what you're reading, because they'll have the name and they'll have the person talking, and you can just read what they're saying. You don't have to have quotations around anything or whatever. And there is really no narration either. It's just the characters talking. Oh yeah, and I forgot the King of the Scots, or the king, is called Duncan. And of course the way he kills him is he invites him over to his castle and stabs him in his sleep. And there's this great thing about out, damn spot. He actually, is that him or Lady Macbeth? I maybe should have done a review, but it's basically the blood is on her hands, and she keeps washing her hands even though they're clean. It's like she can't wash away the sin, she can't wash away the spot. There's this other thing where Lady Macbeth talks about, killing their firstborn if he dares speak of this or confess to anyone. I don't know why I just thought of this, but I'm pretty sure this exact same archetype exists in the Chronicles of Riddick movie. I don't know why I just thought of it, but there's this man and his wife, and they're plotting to assassinate the space emperor or something. And she says to him, you better fall through with this, or else I'm going to make you rue that you thought of this and didn't do it. And so she pushes him. So she's very complicit in this whole thing. Not more than him, but she is not letting him back down at all. And of course, there's a bunch of side characters and sub characters and whatnot. And it's hard to read sometimes for sure, but it's not impossible. The other thing that I was talking about, things that remind me of, the one thing that really immediately made me think of this book was the TV show Berserk, the original 1997 or whatever series. Specifically the scene where Griffith has the Behelit and it's being given to him, and as it's being given to him, he has this vision of him ruling the kingdom and that he is king. And it just immediately reminded me of this, that he was a young urchin boy on the streets, barely surviving, but until he had this vision of grandeur, of ascending the class system and ruling over the king and country, until he had that vision given to him, he would have just remained probably an urchin. But it was this thing that propelled him into something that was beyond himself, for better or for good. And it's the idea that we are almost slaves to our prophecy. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, where we believe so harshly what we shall become that we do become that, but not always in the way that we expect. And as we can see with many prophecies and many cursed items, things that are sorcery and magical and not, usually act as monkey paws and things like this. And they usually end up causing and sowing chaos and betraying the wisher in the end. And of course, that's what happens with Macbeth. He has this tragic downfall where he thought, it's not possible that I could lose, because all these 3 prophecies about the forest moving is impossible. But of course, they all come true. And it's just the descent into madness, the violence, the sin, the guilt, the repercussion, and the justification and downfall of this character to such a low state, and how his high visions of himself have fallen so short. And it's a story about tyranny in general, I suppose. there's an amazing video that you should look up, and it's Christopher Lee. I want to get this right. I think it's okay. I'm not sure. It's either Christopher Lee or Alec Guinness. It might be Alec Guinness. It's either one of those two. Anyway, but they're doing a little speech or sermon on playing Macbeth, and he specifically harps on the out brief candle monologue that Macbeth gives, and he breaks. And this is like in the 70s, so he's much younger, and he breaks down every single line, every single word almost, and the impact and meaning and tone you give to it. And he says it's interesting because he says it focuses all on time. He says tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow till our dusty death. And it's all this nihilistic, empty future prose. I found it. Okay, here we go. And this is, oh yeah, so of course, this is the moment where Lady Macbeth throws herself off the balcony because she can no longer live with the guilt and the regret and the stain of blood and seeing of phantoms and all this stuff. And he says, "Wherefore was that cry?" And the servant says, "The queen, my lord, she is dead." And he's just like, "She should have died thereafter." He's just immediately, he doesn't care that his wife has killed herself. He's just totally removed, lost in this destructive spiral. There would have been a time for such a word, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So we have hereafter, which is kind of, after now, or in the past, she should have done it before. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Anyway, that's the best part of the whole book, the whole play. But you see, you have hour, you have tomorrow. It's all about time and how time is diluted, doesn't make a difference. There's no purpose, there's no meaning in anything. And it's just like, this is the lowest point of the character before he meets his demise. And it's such an interesting, well, I mean, all of Shakespeare's works are interesting aspects and very, very short and very to the point interviews, if you will, into human archetypes. That's why they're so memorable and so relevant still today. This is apparently the Yale edition. This is my grandfather's collection. I don't think he went to Yale, but he has it anyway. And they all come in these little kind of like manga-esque books where they're all roughly the same size and color-coded. And that's kind of neat, I guess, despite being very dusty. But yeah, I guess that's Macbeth. And I'll just kind of just skip to this point, is that should you read it? Absolutely not. And I'm going to say this for all of Shakespeare's works, and this is what I say for everything, that the intended initial medium for a work is the best way to experience it. If something is written as a play, you watch it as a play. If something has been adapted into a movie, you tend to watch the book first. I mean, there are some exceptions. Like, I really like Lord of the Rings and, certain other, books that have transferred into movies. And sometimes the movies are better. It's very rare, but you always hear everyone say the book did it better because it always has more context and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as fun as this is to read and act out, I guess, it's always better to see the play either as a movie or as a stage play on YouTube or in person, preferably. Not really preferably, honestly. I think there's the movies and the short plays on YouTube do it better. I've seen some plays where they mess up, and it's actually quite funny. People come out on stage early, and well, that's the whole fun part of the theater. But I would encourage you to experience the arts and go see this live, along with Faust and whatever kind of plays that you can get into. Because again, it's you have the words, and you can understand what they mean. But when you add the tone and the emphasis, which these actors have practiced for hours and hours and hours, you understand way more through the tone and the action than just reading the direct words. But yeah, and this will go for all of Shakespeare's works. This is my favorite one of his so far. I've only read like Hamlet and Othello and something else. I might talk about those maybe, but they just didn't really impact me as much. This is my favorite. It's very to the point, very archetypical. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Anyway, I will see you guys later, and as always, keep reading. Like how small this is. Okay, bye.